tiny friends, and welcome to my channel. I'm Jolene, and in today's video I want to share with you my miniature vision of how I create realistic bones out of polymer clay. So I've already started and I have a variety of bones here. I've got big ones, skinny ones, small ones, and bits and fragments. So I'm going to start off with a beige polymer clay instead of a white, and that is because I want these bones to look super old and like they've been laying around in the soil for centuries. So the beige is going to help me create a super old base color. So I'm just taking a tiny little bit and I'm rolling it out, and what I'm doing here is actually rolling from the middle, applying a little bit of pressure out towards the ends. So you're going to start in the middle and roll out towards the ends, and this is just going to give me a basic shape to the bones. Now there's really not a lot of shaping to these bones unless you're going in and creating a specific type of bone. Then you're going to go in and add it in shape on the ends. But if you're just creating any bones, this little technique that I'm using on the ends here is really gonna make the shape and give it its own unique individual look to the bones. So I'm just using a sculpting tool here to just give it some pokes and add some crevices and make it look like it's been really aged and fossilized. And tiny friends, if you don't have one of these tools, you can use a sewing needle, a safety pin, a sewing pin, or even a toothpick. Any kind of object or tool that has a very sharp point on the bottom where you can create some holes. And then I'm just flipping it around and using the opposite end, going in and giving it some indentations, some more crevices, and maybe some lines down the middle here. I'm also flipping it around because I want to do both sides of the bones. I don't want one of the sides to be completely flat. I want to give it a dimensional look and make it look as realistic as I can. So I'm just going in here and poking the ends and giving it some detail here, and I'm holding it on the tips of the ends. I'm not really concerned about the piece actually moving and bending as I'm working it, because in the end, tiny friends, before you go to baking these on your baking pan or whatever you're using, you can straighten them out or curve them if you want your bones to be a little curved, but I'm not really concerned with that at this point. But I am just rolling it out in the middle here, and you can even lay it down on the surface if that's what's easier for you, or you can just hold it in your hands. But again, I'm just holding the tips when I hold the piece itself very lightly on the ends, just enough to give it a grip where I can actually work the ends of it and add that detail in. I don't really want to hold it in the middle because I don't want to squeeze it too hard. I am very heavy-handed, and I don't want to have to go back in and re-roll that and risk maybe rolling out some of the detail that I really like and have already given. So you're just going to want to hold it on the ends and work it until you're happy with it and you're happy with the way it looks. So here I am just showing you some lines going down the middle just to give it some added detail, maybe some cracks, or the bone's really old. I'm going to go in and I'm going to push it down, and I'm actually going to give it some really deep crevices as well, because I want that pigment, when I go in and show you how I add some shading to it, I want that pigment to really sink in there and really soak into those crevices. So I'm just going in and adding some indentations around the whole piece, not just one side. Tiny friends, you don't have to be an expert or have a lot of experience with polymer clay to do this. This little process here is great for beginners. It's super easy, not a lot of shaping. And see, this is where I'm going in to give it some really deep crevices, so when I apply some color to it, it's going to sink really down in there. And look how it's beginning to form its own unique shape. Tiny friends, this is where the magic is going to happen. When you start poking around, it's going to start forming its own unique individual look, and every bone is gonna look different. No two bones are gonna look alike. So this is my favorite part of this and why I absolutely love creating these bones. There's very minimal shaping to these bones unless you're going to go in and make a specific bone, which I have twice for this particular batch here. So other than that, you just go in, you roll it out from the middle toward the end, get your basic shape, start creating the ends with your poking, and look how that's coming along. Look at that. See, tiny friends? That's when the magic happens. It just starts forming its own unique shape on its own. So I'm going to actually show you a couple different sizes just to give you a good idea of how I'm doing the different pieces and the different bones here. And I want to apologize for any flaws in my video editing today, because today is my first video, and so I really apologize for that. If you see any flaws, I am learning as I go, and I'm pretty sure that the more I create videos, the better they're going to get. So please have patience with me. I appreciate it. And I also want to give a shout out to a fellow mini maker, Whitney LaBrie, for inspiring me to go ahead and get started on some of these miniature visions that I've been putting aside and, holding back for some time now. Whitney created a witch hutch, and she also put together a beginner kit that she listed in her shop, and I went ahead and purchased one of those kits. So I started creating accessories for it while I'm waiting on it to arrive. So thank you so much, Whitney, for that. And if you haven't seen her witch video, I will post a link in the description box below, so you can go ahead and check that out and see what she does, because I absolutely love it. It came out really great. So thank you again, Whitney, for that. And here I am just showing you on a skinnier bone that they do the same thing as the bigger bones. When you go in and start working the ends, all the bones that you work on, no matter what size, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to start to create their own individual look, all on their own. And again, I'm just holding it at the tip here. I'm not too concerned with it moving around and bending on me. I'm just holding it just enough to have a grip to work it, not too tight, and I do tend to be heavy-handed. But I'm just giving it some lines. I'm doing the same exact thing with every bone, and it's going to react the same way. So it doesn't matter what size you're working on or what type of bone you're working on. Just go on in, give it some deep crevices, poke it around a bit, and tiny friends, be careful of your fingers. You don't want to poke your fingers. So here we have a really skinny bone. Now, these bones can tend to be pretty finicky and fragile as you're getting into the smaller bones or the skinnier bones. So tiny friends, just have patience and don't get discouraged. Don't give up. If you have to keep redoing it, that's what's great about polymer clay, is you can just roll it out and redo it all over again if you're not happy with it, and work it until you're happy with the way that it looks. And you'll see in a few moments how I have to redo a smaller piece, this piece right here that I'm going to start creating. I redo it a few times because I don't like the way that it's turning out. But it turns out in the end. So I'm just taking a really small piece here, and again, I'm going to do the same technique. I'm going to roll from the middle with a little bit of pressure out towards the ends. Even on this smaller pieces, tiny friends, I'm going to do the same thing. And this is really the only specific technique that I'm using here, because as you're working the ends, the bone's just doing what it wants, going in the direction that it wants and shaping itself. So unless you're doing a specific bone, which I will show you later on, that had to have additional shaping to it, it's going to work its own magic. So I'm just going in and adding some deeper crevices. And you know, you can use these bones for all sorts of projects and ideas, and I really encourage you to try it. And if you do decide you want to make some bones, or you need to make some bones and you want to go with a more realistic look, try and think outside the box as well and get really creative with these bones, not just displaying them as is, but actually using them for parts of a unique miniature. So you can use these bones for fences, you can use them for shelves, you can add them to coffins, you can use the smaller bits for hardware, as I'm going to be doing later on. But you know, get really creative with these bones and create something really unique. So if you have any ideas on what you would use these bones for, please let me know in the comments. I love to hear them. But go ahead and start playing around with the ends. I'm adding some more lines and indentations, and this is the piece that I'm going to actually rework because I'm not too happy with the way it turns out. And that's okay, because it's not permanent yet until you bake it. So you can go right ahead and just redo it, roll it out again. You know, if you need to lay it on the surface to work it, whatever works for you, however is easier for you to do it. It's a pretty simple process. It's not hard at all, and it's perfect for a beginner project as well. So again, go ahead and start working that, adding some deeper crevices and some, you know, just some aging and making it look like it's, you know, been in that ground for centuries and it's been decaying and fossilized, and try and give it some really good details on the ends there, and it will shape itself, and that's the magic of it. I love how they turn out, and that's why I wanted to share it with you today. So try and experiment. You know, if you don't have beige polymer clay and if you only have white, that's fine as well. You're still going to get the same effect if you're doing it this way and you're using these techniques. It doesn't matter what color bones you're making, but for this purpose I want to make them super old, and definitely be making a few more stockpiles of these bones. So I'm gonna really get creative with them, and definitely try and work up some really unique miniature pieces with them as well. Now I'm just finishing up this tiny little bone here so we can move on to the coloring process, where I'm going to show you how we're going to shade it and set that color in different effects. And I'm going in on heavier on some of the pieces and darker on some of the pieces, and then some of these pieces I'm just lightly brushing them. So I want to give my bones a variety of tones and textures, and this actually brings out the details. It really makes all that little detail work that you put into it, it really makes them pop. So this is a very essential part of the process. And tiny friends, if you don't have chalk pastels, don't worry about it. You can use eyeshadows, as long as you're using a matte eyeshadow and not a shiny or shimmery or sparkly kind, because you don't want your bones to shimmer and, you know, be shiny or sparkle. But in the beginning, when I started working with polymer clay, I used to use my old eyeshadows that I no longer used anymore, the cheap ones that I had on hand. So they work just as well as these chalk pastels. So you don't have to worry about going out and buying fancy, you know, things to create with. Just use what you have on hand. You can also use charcoal sticks. You can use watered down acrylic paint, but in that case you want to use after you bake. Any kind of acrylic paint that you want to add to your polymer clay, you definitely want to wait until after it's already baked. So I'm just going in here and adding a variety of different shading on the pieces. And I'm not, you know, too worried about keeping it clean, or, you know, I'm not worried about adding too much. So tiny friends, if you start doing this process and you feel like you've added way too much and your piece is too dark and you don't like it, I'm going to show you a super easy solution to that in a few minutes here. So don't worry about that as well. Just go ahead and go for it. Dive into it and, you know, just start applying your shading and your coloring. This is really, really going to add to the age effect and to the age look of your bone. How to work that. So again, tiny friends, just have fun with it. Don't worry about, you know, it being too complicated, because it really isn't. So I'm just finishing up my last piece here and just brushing on some of the chalk pastel pigment. And you know, tiny friends, when I first started searching on YouTube and watching YouTube videos to make my miniatures, I started with looking up polymer clay videos so that I could create miniatures out of polymer clay. And this was before the miniatures really started to trend on YouTube. So it's really funny how this has become my first video, and it's really come full circle for me with this. So it was just a little funny thought that I was having, because I didn't intend for this video to be my first video, but I thought it was simple enough to go ahead and put out and edit. So here's how they're starting to look. And again, I haven't baked them yet, but I'm going to show you how you can clean them off. Now all I've done is taken some alcohol and a cotton swab, and this works really great. I've already started to remove some of the pigment, and you can see how much of the pigment it actually does remove. So again, if you've got too much coloring, you don't like it, you're not happy with it, grab some alcohol, grab a cotton swab, and just start removing it off. Start wiping your pieces off, and it actually comes off pretty easy. But what it really does begin to do, and this is what I've discovered as I was working on these pieces here, it actually gives more added look to your aged look, and it really starts to bring out more of those details that you've put into your piece. So this is kind of like a happy accident kind of thing, where, you know, I've gone in, I put too much pigment down, I want to remove some, I started using the alcohol, and it started looking really good, and, you know, giving a more aged effect and different variety in the pieces, where some of the deeper cavities and crevices were really starting to pop out even more. So I kind of really love how using the alcohol afterwards, the effect that it gives to these pieces in the end. So, or maybe it's this piece, right? But here's a piece, this bone right here, that I wanted to be a specific bone. And so I added the ball joint on the end. And with these specific bones, that's when you're going to do a little bit more shaping on the ends. And it's, you know, not going to work that way on its own. So get yourself some references, some reference photos. And I went on the internet and I found a photo that had several different bones on it, and I just started working from that. And here's what I'm talking about right here. It's, the alcohol is removing the pigment, but look what it's doing to the bone. It's actually pulling out more of the detail and giving it more of a realistic look. So I kind of like going in after I did some of that shading and removing some of the pigment with the alcohol. I just love how this is turning out and looking. Look at that. If you think so, please just let me know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this video, give it a thumbs up. Now I still haven't baked this yet, these pieces yet. This is all pre-bake. This is all before you're going to bake it, tiny friends. Here's a little smaller piece here, and this skinny piece right here that I'm going to be cleaning off. This bone I'm working on now is the second bone that I've actually shaped by hand to make it look like a specific bone that I was looking at in the photo. So most of these bones have shaped themselves, but those two bones I specifically shaped to look like those individual bones. And here you go, there's the magic of the alcohol. It's actually like it's, even though it's taking away the pigment, it's highlighting the detail. So I really love how it's turning out. This little piece I'm working on here is actually going to break on me. So if this happens to you, you know, if you're working on some of these bones and trying to create some of these bones, and this happens to you like it does here, don't worry about it. Just fuse it back together. But I end up putting it back on, and now these bones are completely baked. I baked them at 275 for about 23 to 25 minutes, but you're going to follow the instructions on your clay package. And all I'm doing right here is I've created some muddy, watered down acrylic paint water. I used brown, I used yellow, I used a bit of orange, and a tiny bit of black. And I'm just going on in and adding this just to give my bones some variety of tones and different colors here. And in the end, when it dries, it's not going to be this vivid. It's really going to tone down, but it's going to have just a hint of those different colors. And sometimes in the soil, you'll see clay that actually looks like this color in the soil itself. So, you know, we really don't know what happens to these bones other than they're just going to age and decay as they're sitting in that soil and in the ground for all those centuries. But this really does give it a bit of you know, different toning and shading. And you don't have to go and do this process if you don't want to. You can stop if, you know, you like the way they look after they're baked. But for me, for my purpose, I just wanted to add this extra additional step after they've been baked. And so I'm just dabbing a little bit here and there. I'm not really thinking about it. I'm just applying it randomly, and I'm gonna, after I'm done with this, I'm gonna set it aside to dry, and we're gonna come back to see what they look like in the final end of this and their final look. So I'm just adding a little bit here and there. You know, I'm not thinking about it at all. It's all random. Don't give it too much thought. Just dabs here, dabs there, and it really works out in the end. And it's very, very faint. It doesn't dry as vivid as this at all. Just an additional hint of added coloring. And here they are. And I've turned up the brightness a bit just to try and get you to see some of that detail in there and how great they really turned out. And I just love this so much. Tiny friends, if you love these bones and you really like this video today, please give it a thumbs up and let me know so in the comments. Let me know what you would do with these bones and some ideas you may have on how you would create a unique miniature using these bones as parts. And subscribe, because I really have so much to share with you, and I just want to thank you for being here with me today. And I'm just showing you, I'm picking up multiple bones here to show you how they turned out, and how each individual bone has created its own look. And you can see all that detail in there and how well they looked and how aged they looked. And they really do look like they have been sitting around that soil for centuries. And that is exactly what I wanted to go for and what I was trying to create for the purposes of the miniatures that I'm going to be using these bones for. So if you're going for that look, if you're trying to create that look and can achieve it, I hope this video helps you, and I hope that I have inspired you to try these, and that I really encourage you to go ahead and give this a try and create something, you know, really one of a kind with these pieces. And here's a fragment that I really didn't do anything to the end on this one, did I? But that's okay. It really looks fabulous as is, and it looks realistic as well, and it's just a broken bone, a piece of fragment. So, you know, I'm just going in so that I can show you the individual pieces and how they all pretty much, you know, they all worked itself into its own individual shape. Now these pieces are still a little flimsy. They didn't really cure all the way. So if you try and make some of these skinnier bones, you might have that happen as well. Just handle it with care. They're still as good as all the other bones, and they're still going to work out in your projects as long as you handle them with care, because they were a little bit more flexible. And I don't know if it's just because they're so dainty and skinny. Just be careful with them, and you can see how they look. Here's the bone, the second bone that I shaped specifically to look like the bone I was referencing in the photo. So tiny friends, please come back again to see me. I'm going to be sharing some great projects with you, and I hope you decide to create your own stockpile as well. Until then, have an amazing day. Bye-bye.